Welcome back to the program. Joining me this morning on our panel of politicians, the Labor MP Nick Champion and the Liberal MP Kelly O'Dwyer. Good morning, to both of you. We're seeing the debate over the asylum seeker issue, Migration Act changes, proposed changes getting underway this morning. Kelly O'Dwyer, we're seeing reports that some of your colleagues are getting increasingly worried that if the coalition rejects the changes the government wants to make, then it's the coalition that will end up being blamed every time a boat arrives and we see an influx, really, of people coming to this country.
Well, Ashley, with all due respect, that's the Labor Party line. They'd love people to think that the coalition is somehow responsible for the enormous crisis that now is in our border protection policy. And it's a crisis of the Labor Party's own making. 3 weeks ago, the High Court brought down their decision, which said that Malaysia was not going to be a viable solution. Now, we've been saying this all along. We know that this is not a sensible solution because, of course, there are no protections built in for people who are vulnerable being sent over to a country where they're not signatories to the UN Refugee Convention. Now, in August of 2008, the Labor Party changed the policy, and since that time we have seen, since the abolishment of offshore processing and temporary protection visas, we've seen over 12,000 people arrive on 241 boats, and since they announced the Malaysian solution we've seen just under 1,000 people also arrive. The crisis is of the Labor Party's own making. We are trying to work with the Labor Party to ensure that there is no doubt that there can be offshore processing, but we want protections in place, and we've received legal advice that says that our solution is the best one.
Nick Champion, you're in government. This is Labor's problem. Do you really think voters are going to see this as something that really the coalition should have stepped up to when it's really your problem?
Well, for the last year and a half, all we've heard from Tony Abbott is this banging on about stop the boats, stop the boats, stop the boats. That's all we've heard from backbenchers like Kelly, repeating this line over and over and over again. And then when they get the chance to actually do something in the Parliament and vote with the government to basically ensure offshore processing, they balk at it and they back in the Green position, the minority position. And it's not just Labor Party people who are saying that this is curious and wrong. It's Bill Hassel, who's a former Liberal leader in West Australia, written an opinion piece, and I'll read it. He finishes with, "The Australian public will not thank the opposition for more boats and onshore processing, the inevitable outcome of their unholy alliance with the Greens." That's what Bill Hassel, former leader of the Liberals in West Australia, says.
That's breathtaking. You're in a formal alliance with the Greens in government. I mean, to suggest...
No, I'm not suggesting it. Bill Hassel, former Liberal Party
We are looking forward to seeing this debate unfolding in the Parliament today. We do have a few more issues I want to get to, so let's move on. Yeah, industrial relations, you heard me discussing this with the Senator Kelly. We have seen Tony Abbott be very firm on this. He was asked a direct question the other night about the Coalition's industrial relations policy. For our viewers who haven't seen it, this was Tony Abbott's response.
We don't support statutory individual contracts. We did once, we don't now. We're happy to look at building more flexibility into the Fair Work Act. As Heather Ridout said the other day, the individual flexibility agreements under the Fair Work Act have promised so much, delivered so little, and I'll be looking forward to the kind of suggestions that people like Heather might have.
Kelly O'Dwyer, would you like to see individual workplace contracts reintroduced?
Well, obviously I support the leader, and the leader has said very clearly that work choices is dead, buried and cremated. There are a number of people in my electorate of Higgins who have said that the flexibility with individual contracts is something that they need to increase productivity in their businesses, and I personally am quite persuaded by that view. However, there are many ways to achieve flexibility, and I know that we as a coalition will have a debate around this issue as to the best way forward. We will listen to business, we will listen to people who come to us and point out the deficiencies in the Fair Work Act. Even Wayne Swan has come out and said that there are serious deficiencies in the Fair Work Act. We're going to be looking at solving problems.
So let me get this right. You're saying on one hand you support the leader, but on the other hand you actually think that his comments that individual workplace contracts aren't the way to go in terms of increasing workplace flexibility were actually wrong.
Well, no. What I've said is we are going to be having a broader debate about workplace relations policy. The leader has made the position of the coalition
going on still. Should he have ruled that out?
Well, I think the flexibility provided by individual contracts is something that the coalition needs to seriously consider. Now, there are a range of ways that we can consider that, and I'm sure we will. But first and foremost, we're going to be...
because Mr Abbott ruled it out.
Well, in individual contracts, yes, but there are other methods to increase flexibility. And, I know the Labor Party would be very keen for us to announce our workplace relations policy well in advance of the election, and they'd like me to announce it today. But you know what? We're going to announce it before the election, when the election is actually called.
I'll tell you why we'd be keen for you to announce it, because last time you waited till 6 days out before the election,
well,
even then, that policy was a sham. Every time you hear a Liberal Party politician talk about flexibility, workers know what that means. It means flexibility to cut their overtime, their penalty rates and their wages.
Well, that's simply not
and that's
true.
all
and
you've ever been about. It's what the first round of Reith reforms were about. It's about what work choices were about.
You'd welcome that comment from Tony Abbott that he won't introduce...
Well, it's a sham. It's a political sham. Like so much of Tony Abbott's commentary, this is what he says, and we know what they will do in government. Because people like Kelly... Kelly, I gave you a go. People like Kelly and Jamie Briggs are the honest brokers of the true Liberal Party position, and I give them points for their courage. I think they're decent people because they're at least being honest. Flexibility. Every worker knows what that means. Tony Abbott's sort of running this line, nothing to see here, nothing to see here, and then they'll try and drop their policy 6 days out before an election. Listen to Jamie Briggs, listen to Kelly. They're the real policy makers in the Liberal Party.
A lot of your colleagues were pretty furious yesterday, weren't they, in reaction to Tony Abbott's comments? They said that he was being too premature. He shouldn't have ruled that out on national television before the party room had debated it.
Well, look, I find it very curious that we're debating opposition policy here. I mean, I presume that you've acknowledged that we're going to be changing government sometime soon, because there's certainly a lot of speculation about your leader and a change in leadership and potentially going into an election sometime soon. Now, let me make...
It's traditional in politics that it's a contest between policies. You have to have them.
Well, we absolutely do, and we release them before the election, just
6 days.
Just as you do. What we don't do is we don't tell a lie 6 days out before an election to the Australian people that there will be no carbon tax under the government, and then break that promise.
You will give all sorts
we
of
also don't, as the Prime Minister has done, say that we will have...
Let's look at that issue that Kelly just raised.
And then break that promise.
Today, the Daily Telegraph has a report, again hinting at leadership tensions between Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard. This time, they've dug up an email sent from the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff to Kevin Rudd's Chief of Staff. They obtained it through Freedom of Information. This email says that after a trip costing $77,000, the PM's COS told Kevin Rudd to basically keep the costs down. This morning, the Communications Minister said that's nothing unusual.
The PM's office regularly ensure that ministers are all not being extravagant, wanting to make sure we get best use for taxpayers' money. So it's perfectly normal for Kevin to be travelling, and it's absolutely normal for the PM's office to come back to people and say, OK, what about trimming this? What about taking note of that? That happens all the time, absolutely normal exchange.
Nick Champion, the Daily Telegraph and the Australian newspaper this morning also reporting rumours that Kevin Rudd's been hitting the phones from New York, shoring up support, counting the numbers that he might launch a challenge. Is there any truth in that?
Has he called you yet?
No.
Not yet?
These are all... Look, this is sort of part of the fevered sort of speculation the Liberal Party put out there because they don't want to focus on policy. And Kelly just said it before. She said, you're so focused on our policy. They don't want to discuss our own policies. Because what you've got in opposition, though, is this gigantic policy Ponzi scheme where you hold every contradictory position and you can't do it.
On your own parties for a minute. Nick Champion, let's just...
There is no speculation.
26% primary vote in the news poll the other day, though. Backbenchers must be feeling nervous. Is it right that Julia Gillard's been given until Christmas to improve? Otherwise, there could be a change.
It's a very tough environment around the world, right? Global financial instability. We've got a lot of challenges in terms of climate change, a whole range of other things. And we are undertaking pretty tough reforms. They're not going to be easy for any government. And you know what? sometimes in politics you just have to have the courage of your convictions and let the people decide. And so we're going to...
So go to an election.
Well, no,
we've
been elected to govern for 3 years, and that is what we're going to do.
Kevin Rudd's travel costs? He is, of course, the foreign minister. It's his job to travel overseas and represent Australia's interests, but is he taking it that step further? Is he spending too much?
Well, this FOI, right, is essentially an email exchange between two staffers. It's entirely routine. But look who put it out. Jamie Briggs put it out. And last week, Jamie Briggs put out an email about, or a list of Kevin's travel saying he's travelling too much. Now, which is the Liberal Party position? Either Kevin's travelling too much, or he's, or you know, the PM's trying to cut costs.
You can spend a lot on the travel that you're doing.
It's bizarre. We never did this to Alexander Downer. And if you want to get into this game, I promise you this, over my time in politics, I'll make sure that every time your foreign ministers go overseas, we'll do a little travel tally on that. Every time John Howard does, we'll do a little tally on that.
We don't waste taxpayers' dollars in the way that this government does. Well, I can tell you first and foremost, the idea that... Well, I will respond first to what Nick said before about the speculation and how, you know, that they're facing, you know, tough reforms and this is why apparently they're unpopular. No, you're unpopular because you lied to the Australian people and every policy you have touched, you have stuffed up. That is why the Labor Party in this government, this coalition government with the Greens...
Employment rate of 5%.
With the Greens is unpopular. Do I get your reaction to this story? Do you think Kevin Rudd is spending too much on travel?
Well, first and foremost, it's not routine for these sorts of emails to be sent. It might be routine for somebody to pick up the phone, but this is deliberate. This has been put in writing to slap down Kevin Rudd because Julia Gillard knows that she's got a leadership issue with Kevin Rudd. This speculation is not mere speculation. It's actually happening right now in the Labor Party. There are people talking about getting rid of Julia Gillard before Christmas, and we know that they've done it before and they'll probably do it again.
Kelly O'Dwyer, Nick Champion, we're out of time.
Thanks.
Thank you for your insights on this morning's debate. We do appreciate it. And thank you for your company this morning. I'll see you again at this time tomorrow. Until then, I'm Ashley Gillen. Thanks for joining us.